Hey guys, tonight we re-slipping back through the smoke-filled alleys and chattering markets of the medieval world to discover what fast food looked like before deep fryers, delivery apps, or anything remotely resembling health inspections. Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this, not just because of the questionable meat pies, but because medieval street food was served in an era where soap was suspicious, refrigeration was sorcery, and hand-washing was an upper-class myth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always curious who's tuning in and when. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking down a narrow cobblestone lane in a medieval town, probably London, maybe Paris, perhaps York. It's around midday, and the street is alive with a smell of sizzling fat, sweet ale, and something vaguely fishy. You read not sure if it's coming from a nearby stall or the open sewer trickling along the side of the road. Either way, it's a scent you're learning to live with. Shouts echo from every direction. Vendors hawk their food in loud, melodic pitches that sound more like chants than sales talk. Children dart between carts. A man in a faded tunic is chasing a chicken that does not want to be dinner. This is your medieval food court. The entire city really is a kind of open-air restaurant. There are no drive-throughs. There are no menus printed in Comic Sans on backlit signs, but there is food. Lots of it. Some of it actually hot. You turn a corner and find a woman standing behind a cart built from reused timber and lashed together with rope. She's got a steaming cauldron of something that smells surprisingly decent. Onion, barley, maybe some root vegetables if you're lucky. No meat today, unless you count the hint of marrow clinging to one of the bones bobbing in the pot. It's thick, goopy, and served in a shallow wooden bowl. Though, if you're poor enough, she ladle it straight into your cupped hands. No shame here. Fast food doesn't judge. Bread is your base layer. Everything comes with bread. Round loaves, flat rolls, or, if you're slumming it, which, let's be honest, you are, dark, rough-textured black bread, cut into thick hunks. You tear off a piece, dip it into the stew, and chew. It's filling, it's warm, and it costs you just one small coin. You didn't even sit down. That's the key. This food isn't made to linger over. It's survival-grade cuisine. It's designed to keep you moving, working, surviving one day at a time. A few stalls down, another vendor is shouting about his pies of Paris. He cries, promising a taste of Parisian luxury. But these aren't the flaky, buttery pastries you're imagining. These are hand pies, or pasties, with thick, dense crusts designed more for durability than delicacy. The crust is essentially an edible container, a way to carry your meal without a plate inside. Well, that's a mystery. It could be beef, pork, or pigeon. It could also be eel, if you're near a river. Or it could be something ... Else the ingredients are often just leftovers, chopped up and baked until they unrecognizable. You buy one, still warm, from the portable oven. The crust is tough, almost like hardtack, but the filling is savory and surprisingly satisfying. It's greasy, it's salty, and it's exactly what you need to fuel another few hours of back-breaking labor. Let's not forget the drinks. Forget artisanal coffee or craft beer. Your choices are ale or ale, and it's not the strong, flavorful stuff we know today. Medieval ale was often weak, what they called small beer. It was safer than the water, which could kill you, and provided a cheap source of calories. You'd get a tankard of it from a woman carrying a bucket and a ladle, the foam sloshing over the sides as she serves you. It's cloudy, slightly sweet, and tastes of yeast and whatever else fell into the barrel. But it's wet, and on a dusty day, that's all that matters. As the sun begins to set, the street food scene changes. The stew pots are scraped clean, and the pie sellers pack up. Now, the cook shops open their shutters. These are the closest thing to a medieval takeaway restaurant. They specialize in roasting meat on spits over open fires. The smell of roasting pig or goose fills the evening air, a tantalizing aroma for those who can afford it. But you're not buying a whole goose. Instead, you buy a slice, carved directly from the spit onto a thick slab of bread called a trencher. The bread soaks up all the juices and fat, becoming a flavorful part of the meal itself. After you've eaten the meat, you can eat the trencher. Or, if you're feeling generous, you can give it to a beggar or a dog. Nothing goes to waste. This was the reality of fast food for centuries. It wasn't about convenience in the modern sense. It was about survival. It was for the urban poor, the laborers, the travelers, people who didn't have kitchens or the time to cook. It was fuel, pure and simple. No frills, no guarantees, just a hot meal to get you through the day. And as you finish your greasy trencher and wash it down with the last of your small beer, you realize that for all our modern advances, the fundamental need that drove this industry hasn't changed at all. We just swapped the cobblestones for pavement and the open sewers for, well, at least the sewers are covered now. Ever wondered what it was like to grab a bite to eat in the Middle Ages? Forget charming taverns and cozy hearths. For most people, the reality was something else entirely. Picture this: you're walking down a muddy, crowded street in a medieval city. The air is a thick soup of smells: wood smoke, unwashed bodies, livestock, and something delicious. For the average medieval person, a private kitchen was a luxury they couldn't afford. Cooking required time, space, and expensive fuel. So, what did they do? They hit the streets. The medieval marketplace wasn't just for buying goods. It was the world's first and largest food court. You pass a stall where a guy with a very serious expression is roasting skewers over a smoky pit. What kind of meat is it? Could be pork, could be goat. You really hope it's not cat, but honestly, you're not about to ask. People are lining up, and he's dousing the skewers with a dark sauce from a jug that looks suspiciously like an old wine container. In this era, asking too many questions could ruin a perfectly good meal. Here's the fascinating part. Eating in public wasn't seen as low class. It was just how life worked. Rich merchants, poor laborers, traveling pilgrims, everyone ate street food. Major cities like London and Paris had designated areas with open-air cookshops as early as the 12th century. These weren't fancy restaurants with brand names, but they had something more powerful: reputations. If a vendor served bad food, word would spread like wildfire. Your business, and maybe even your life, depended on not poisoning your customers. Let's talk about fast food, medieval style. You spot a man selling hand-sized pies. These aren't the sweet apple pies you're thinking of. These are savory meat pies, designed for eating on the go. The crust is thick, and the filling is a hot, greasy, and mysterious mix. It might be spiced beef, or it could be a blend of organ meat and oats. You're hungry, so you buy one. It's oily, the crust is flaky, and there's a chewy bit you decide not to think too hard about. It tastes good enough. It fills your stomach, and that's what matters. You find a quiet corner to eat your pie and watch the world go by. A monk is haggling over the price of fish. A woman expertly balances a pot of stew on her head. A kid makes a run for it after snatching a boiled egg from a vendor's cart. It's chaotic, but it's a functioning system. This was the daily routine for millions. One of the coolest culinary innovations of the time was the trencher. Imagine your plate was also part of your meal. Trenchers were thick, stale slices of bread used to hold stews, meats, and sauces. You'd eat the food off the top, and then, if you were still hungry, you'd eat the sauce-soaked bread plate. It sounds incredibly efficient, but medieval bread could be tough enough to use as a building material. Still, no washing up required. So, how organized was all this? Historians are still debating it. Some records show that cities had strict regulations. Guilds of bakers, butchers, and cooks controlled who could sell what and where. They set quality standards and prices to prevent fraud. For example, a pie maker wasn't allowed to sell reheated diode pies. There were even food police who would inspect the goods. However, other evidence suggests that enforcement was patchy. Away from the main market squares, in the winding back alleys, it was probably more of a free-for-all. A lot of it came down to trust and local reputation. You'd buy from the vendor you knew, the one whose food hadn't made your neighbor sick last week. It was a high-stakes game of guess the ingredient. Now, you need something to drink. You can't just drink the water. That's a great way to get seriously ill. So, what are your options? For most people, the answer was ale. Weak, low-alcohol ale was the standard beverage for everyone, including children. It was safer than water and cheaper than wine. You find a vendor and get a mug of it. It's lukewarm and a little sour, but it's hydrating and gets the job done. This whole experience highlights a key difference between then and now. We think of street food as a fun, optional treat. For medieval city dwellers, it was an absolute necessity. The entire urban food system was built around providing quick, cheap, and ready-to-eat meals for a population that couldn't cook for itself. It was a complex, bustling, and sometimes risky industry that fed entire civilizations. One questionable meat pie at a time. From roasted meats and savory pies to fish, cheese, and baked goods, the variety was surprisingly wide. You could find vendors selling everything from simple bread and butter to exotic spiced delicacies imported from afar. If you had the coin, the medieval street was a culinary adventure, a daily gamble that kept the heart of the city beating. Imagine you're wandering through a medieval city. Forget the grand cathedrals and towering castles for a moment. Look closer at the heart of the city, the marketplace. What do you smell? Not just the usual medieval mix of mud and humanity. You smell something delicious. You smell pies. You turn a corner and there it is, a pie man, shouting over the clamor of the crowd. Hot pies, hot pies. Good pig and goose, eat them now. You buy one. It's heavy, warm in your hands. You break through the tough crust. Inside, a steaming mix of pork, maybe some beef, swimming in a thick, savory gravy. The flavor is intense, peppery, with hints of herbs you can't quite place. This is medieval fast food. It's not just a snack. It's a full meal, designed to be eaten on the go by merchants, laborers, and travelers. No plates, no forks, just you and a pocket of hot, meaty goodness. But pie culture was so much more than just a quick lunch. It was woven into the very fabric of life. There were pies for every season, every festival, every religious observance. During Lent, when meat was forbidden, you'd find pies filled with fish or cheese. For the Feast of St. Martin, it was all about goose pie. And at the grandest royal banquets, pies became pure spectacle. Imagine a coronation feast. An older woman tends a low stone oven built right into the wall of a crumbling shop. Her pies are smaller, with crispier-looking crusts. The smell is different, onion, herbs, and something earthy, maybe some offal. She sees you looking and offers a gentle smile. Her cart is meticulously organized. It's clear she's been doing this for decades. This isn't just a way to survive. It's her profession, her craft. Street cooks were often women widows or lower-class wives trying to supplement their family's income. They were the masters of their trade. They knew how to create incredible flavor from simple ingredients, how to feed a crowd quickly, and how to make sure nothing ever went to waste. There's a real sense of pride in her work. You can see it in the way she handles each pie. She offers you one, on the house. You gratefully accept. This one feels different. The crust is flakier, dusted with something that tastes like fennel and pepper. You take a bite. The filling is still a mystery meat, but it tastes cleaner, brighter somehow. You nod your approval, your mouth too full to speak. She just nods back. It's a silent, shared moment, a mutual understanding between two people connected by pastry. As the sun begins to set and the air cools, you notice something surprising. More pie carts are appearing, not fewer. The evening rush is on. Workers are heading home after a long day. Children are out running errands, and late-arriving travelers are looking for a hot meal. The demand for pies spikes. You toss the hard, inedible corner, the huff paste, to a passing dog. It sniffs it, gives you a look of complete betrayal, and trots away. Fair enough. Not everyone was a fan of the super tough crust. But you're starting to appreciate this life. Medieval fast food might not have golden arches, but it has golden crusts, smoky street corners. Here, cooks stand over bubbling vats of oil, dipping pieces of cod, herring, or eel into a simple batter of flour and ale before dropping them in. The sizzle is deafening. They serve the crispy, golden fish piping hot, often wrapped in a piece of parchment. It's simple, greasy, and absolutely delicious. This was the original fish and chips, centuries before the chips part even existed. The demand was huge. Not just on Fridays, but during Lent and on numerous other fast days throughout the year. For nearly half the year, meat was off the menu for devout Christians. So, fish vendors thrived. They were an essential part of the urban food landscape, providing a quick, satisfying, and religiously compliant meal for everyone from apprentices to knights. Step inside and feel the pulse of life all around you. At the far end of the room, a group of merchants is already deep into their second round of ale. One of them slams his fist on the table, shouting something about the outrageous price of dried cod. While his friend laughs so hard, he spits ale right into his own beard. It's a lively scene. Over by the hearth, a pair of young travelers are quietly devouring a shared dish of beans and cheese. You can tell they're starving, fresh off a long journey. The crowd is a real mix: locals, travelers, students, even a couple of priests who are trying very hard to pretend they're not enjoying the salted meat, just a little too much. Taverns like this were the great equalizer of medieval food culture. It didn't matter if you were a landless laborer or a minor noble just passing through town. If you had coin, you could eat. Sure, the nobles might get a slightly nicer corner, or maybe even rent a private room upstairs. But the food, it all came from the same pot. That was part of the charm, the shared experience. In big cities like Paris or Florence, taverns often became hubs for more than just food and drink. They were places for political chatter and literary gossip, especially in the university districts. Imagine it, a full medieval menu of food, drink, and a side of subversive Latin poetry. Here's a fun historical fact for you. In many places, taverns were legally required to sell bread and food alongside their drinks. The main reason? To keep people from drinking themselves to death on an empty stomach. The logic was simple. Get a few bites in you, and maybe you'll actually make it home tonight. Whether that strategy actually worked is well debatable. The tavern also served another purpose. It was your medieval drive-through. Yes, you heard that right. Takeout existed. You could pay for a bowl of hot food, pour it into your own little clay pot, or wrap it in trenchers thick slices of bread that acted as plate sand. Be on your way. It wasn't exactly glamorous, but if you were rushing to work or just wanted to eat in peace without a wandering minstrel breathing onion breath down your neck, it was the perfect solution. As you look toward the entrance, you notice a woman has set up shop right outside the tavern door. She's got a basket brimming with cold pies and hard cheese, selling to anyone who doesn't want to deal with a rowdy tavern crowd inside. Now, you might think she's competition, but the tavern keeper seems to tolerate her presence. Maybe she's his cousin. Maybe she pays him off in cheese. Who knows? That's just how these places operated, on a web of informal networks, whispered agreements, and unspoken rules. Your medieval Yelp review was basically just word of mouth about who hadn't given you food poisoning yet. There's a long-standing debate among scholars about who these taverns primarily served. Were they for locals or for travelers? Some argue they catered mostly to travelers, since many were strategically located near city gates or major crossroads. Others believe they were neighborhood staples, something like a local pub combined with a short-order kitchen. The historical evidence swings both ways. But one thing is for sure. You're here now, and your stomach is no longer grumbling. You take another look around the room. Something's missing. Forks. Nobody is using one. It's mostly fingers, knives, and the occasional spoon for soups and stews. Forks, as a dining tool, were still considered an exotic novelty in many parts of Europe. In some circles, they were even seen as effeminate or morally suspicious. Can you imagine? So, you do as the locals do. You stick with your fingers and your knife, tearing off a piece of savory pork and sipping your broth, just like everyone else. Welcome to dinner in the Middle Ages. Imagine you're wandering through a medieval city. Forget the grand cathedrals and towering castles for a moment. Look closer at the heart of the city, the marketplace. What do you smell? Not just the usual medieval mix of mud and humanity. You smell something delicious. You smell pies. You turn a corner and there it is, a pie man, shouting over the clamor of the crowd. Hot pies, hot pies. Good pig and goose, eat them now. You buy one. It's heavy, warm in your hands. You break through the tough crust. Inside, a steaming mix of pork, maybe some beef, swimming in a thick, savory gravy. The flavor is intense, peppery, with hints of herbs you can't quite place. This is medieval fast food. It's not just a snack. It's a full meal, designed to be eaten on the go by merchants, laborers, and travelers. No plates, no forks, just you and a pocket of hot, meaty goodness. But pie culture was so much more than just a quick lunch. It was woven into the very fabric of life. There were pies for every season, every festival, every religious observance. During Lent, when meat was forbidden, you'd find pies filled with fish or cheese. For the Feast of St. Martin, it was all about goose pie. And at the grandest royal banquets, pies became pure spectacle. Imagine a coronation feast. An older woman tends a low stone oven built right into the wall of a crumbling shop. Her pies are smaller, with crispier-looking crusts. The smell is different, onion, herbs, and something earthy, maybe some offal. She sees you looking and offers a gentle smile. Her cart is meticulously organized. It's clear she's been doing this for decades. This isn't just a way to survive. It's her profession, her craft. Street cooks were often women widows or lower-class wives trying to supplement their family's income. They were the masters of their trade. They knew how to create incredible flavor from simple ingredients, how to feed a crowd quickly, and how to make sure nothing ever went to waste. There's a real sense of pride in her work. You can see it in the way she handles each pie. She offers you one, on the house. You gratefully accept. This one feels different. The crust is flakier, dusted with something that tastes like fennel and pepper. You take a bite. The filling is still a mystery meat, but it tastes cleaner, brighter somehow. You nod your approval, your mouth too full to speak. She just nods back. It's a silent, shared moment, a mutual understanding between two people connected by pastry. As the sun begins to set and the air cools, you notice something surprising. More pie carts are appearing, not fewer. The evening rush is on. Workers are heading home after a long day. Children are out running errands, and late-arriving travelers are looking for a hot meal. The demand for pies spikes. You toss the hard, inedible corner, the huff paste, to a passing dog. It sniffs it, gives you a look of complete betrayal, and trots away. Fair enough. Not everyone was a fan of the super tough crust. But you you're starting to appreciate this life. Medieval fast food might not have golden arches, but it has golden crusts, smoky street corners. Here, cooks stand over bubbling vats of oil, dipping pieces of cod, herring, or eel into a simple batter of flour and ale before dropping them in. The sizzle is deafening. They serve the crispy, golden fish piping hot, often wrapped in a piece of parchment. It's simple, greasy, and absolutely delicious. This was the original fish and chips, centuries before the chips part even existed. The demand was huge, not just on Fridays, but during Lent and on numerous other fast days throughout the year. For nearly half the year, meat was off the menu for devout Christians. So, fish vendors thrived. They were an essential part of the urban food landscape, providing a quick, satisfying, and religiously compliant meal for everyone from apprentices to knights.
Ever grabbed a hot pie from a street vendor? That feeling of biting through a flaky crust into something savory, meaty, maybe a little peppery. That simple pleasure connects you to centuries of history, to peasants, pilgrims, and even poets. It's more than just a quick meal. It's a story baked in pastry. Imagine this. You hand over a coin, and in return, you get a parcel of heat, almost too hot to hold. You take that first bite, the crust shatters, buttery and crisp. See, back in the day, most ordinary people didn't own an oven. Ovens were huge, expensive to build, and even more expensive to fuel. They were either communal, shared by a whole village, or belonged to a professional baker. So, how did you get your pie baked? You'd prepare your filling, wrap it in dough at home, and then carry your unbaked pie, carefully covered, to the local baker. For a small fee, the baker would slide it into their massive, roaring oven alongside dozens of others. This created a whole economy around pies. It wasn't just about selling finished pies. It was about the service of baking them. People made a little extra coin with their hearth, and a bustling trade grew around this simple act. And, of course, with any trade there were tricks. If you were a vendor looking to make a bit more profit, you could get creative. Maybe you'd stretch the expensive meat filling with cheaper ingredients like oats, breadcrumbs, or chopped onions. Once it was all baked together inside that golden crust, who would be the wiser? It was a calculated risk, a way to pocket the difference and feed more people with less This little bit of culinary cunning is as much a part of the pie's history as the ingredients themselves. Now, let's talk about travel. How did you take food on a long journey before refrigeration or vacuum-sealed packs? The answer, again, was the pie. But not the kind you're picturing. There's a fascinating historical tidbit about something called huff paste. This wasn't your light, flaky, buttery pastry. This was a rock-hard, thick dough made from cheap flour, water, and maybe a little suet. Its only job was to be a durable, inedible container for the meat inside. Think of it as an ancient biodegradable Tupperware. The huff paste shell was so tough it could withstand bumps and jostles on the road for days, even weeks. It protected the cooked filling from dirt, insects, and the air, keeping it preserved. The salt in the filling and the hard, dry crust worked together to stave off spoilage. When it was time to eat, you'd break open the hard shell, scoop out the contents, and throw the pastry away. Or, if you were really desperate, you might try to gnaw on it. These pies were the original long-life meal, a testament to human ingenuity in an age before preservatives. Just salt, heat, and a crust like concrete. Walking through a bustling historical market, you'd see pies of all shapes and sizes, and the fillings. They were a reflection of what was cheap, plentiful, and available. As you finish your own pie, imagine spotting two kids arguing over a half-eaten one. One swears it's fish, the other is convinced it's eel. And guess what? They could both be right. Eel was an incredibly common pie filler, especially in England. It was cheap, easily caught in rivers, and could be bought in barrels. It had a slippery, chewy texture that, when mixed with spices and baked in a pie, became a staple for the masses. How would you know what was really inside that pastry crust once it was mixed with strong spices like pepper and nutmeg? Historical records show that the authorities were well aware of this problem. There are accounts of vendors being fined, publicly shamed, or even flogged for selling spoiled pies. The term they used was often corrupt flesh, which sounds just as grim as it was. Some unlucky customers who fell ill after eating a bad pie even took the vendor to court. It shows that food safety was a concern even then. But whether justice was always served, or whether the evidence was simply baked into the next day's batch, is a question history leaves unanswered. Every bite of a street pie was a small gamble. You were trusting the person who made it, trusting that the heat of the oven had done its job, and hoping that the savory filling wasn't hiding a dangerous secret. This brings us back to the baker's oven, the heart of the community. It wasn't just a place of business. It was a social hub. While waiting for their pies to bake, people would gossip, exchange news, and connect with their neighbors. The baker was a central figure in the community, not just a craftsman, but a gatekeeper of warmth and cooked food. The smell of baking bread and savory pies would have filled the streets, a constant, comforting reminder of community and sustenance. This communal aspect is something we've largely lost in our modern world of private kitchens and microwave meals. The meat pie is more than just a convenience. It's a baked-in piece of our collective past.
You follow your nose through the bustling medieval street, drawn by an irresistible smell. There it is, a rickety wooden cart parked beside a stone basin, sloshing with eels, carp, and a few trout that have seen better days. Behind the counter, a sharpened woman, her sleeves dusted with flour, slices fillets with a speed that's both impressive and slightly terrifying. One by one, she drops them into a wide, blackened pan of bubbling oil. The oil sizzles and spits, releasing a scent that's pure heaven if heaven smells like garlic, onions, and river fish. The whole setup is simple. The pan sits over a small brick hearth, fueled by scraps of wood. The batter she uses is basic, just flour, maybe a splash of old ale or stale wine for flavor, and a generous handful of herbs to mask any, shall we say, fishy funk. And let's be honest, that funk is definitely present. You try not to breathe too deeply as you slide a coin onto the rough wooden plank, serving as her counter. In return, she hands you a portion of fried fish about the size of your hand, wrapped not in paper, but in a thick crust of old bread. It's hot, greasy, and beautifully crisp on the edges. You take a bite. That satisfying crunch gives way to a flaky, tender center. It's not cod or haddock, but some anonymous river dweller. Still, it's a welcome change from the endless salt pork and hard bread that makes up most of your diet. You devour it in seconds, licking the oil from your fingers because soap is a luxury you can't afford right now. This scene isn't just about a quick meal. It's a window into a massive cultural and economic force. The concept of fish on Fridays wasn't just a simple religious suggestion. The medieval church dictated numerous meatless days, not just Fridays, but also Wednesdays, Saturdays, and the entire 40-day season of Lent. This meant that for nearly half the year, a huge portion of the European population couldn't eat meat. People had to get creative, and fish became the answer. This religious requirement created a colossal demand, and savvy entrepreneurs, the fast food vendors of their day, seized the opportunity. Think about the average person back then. Maybe you didn't have cooking fuel at home, or perhaps your small tenement didn't even have an oven. You've just finished a long day of hard labor and need something quick, meat-free, and edible before the evening church bells ring for vespers. That's where the fish fryer comes in. These street-side cooks provided a crucial service for the working class, travelers, and the devout. The demand they served fueled entire economies. Armies of fishmongers carted their fresh catches into cities every single day. Barrels of salted herring were shipped all the way from the North Sea to inland towns. Monasteries, major centers of power and learning, even had their own eel pits to ensure a steady supply. Oysters and mussels were scooped right from the shore and tossed into bubbling stew pots. While a lot of this seafood ended up in private kitchens or the grand kitchens of abbeys, a significant chunk was destined for carts just like this one, sizzling in cheap oil and disappearing into the mouths of hungry ordinary people. Now, frying fish wasn't exactly a medieval invention. We have records showing that ancient Romans were deep-frying small fish, like smelts, centuries earlier. They loved their street food, but it was in the booming, crowded cities of the Middle Ages, places like London, Bruges, and Venice, that the fried fish stand truly became an institution. It was a dependable, relatively affordable, and convenient option for the poor, the rushed, and the spiritually obedient. It was the original fast food for the masses. You stand near the cart for a moment, just watching the vendor work her magic. She flicks fillet after fillet into the hot oil with practiced ease. A young boy runs up, dropping off a bucket of freshly caught river fish. For his trouble, the vendor hands him a fried fish head, which he starts chewing on immediately, without even blinking. Then you overhear a woman at the front of the line asking for the crispiest one. It's a small moment, but it's a powerful reminder that human nature hasn't really changed in 1,000 years. Everyone still wants the corner piece of the brownie, the crunchiest part of the roast. The desire for that perfect bite is timeless. Among historians, there's a bit of a debate about just how often these fish stalls operated. Were they a daily feature of city life? Some scholars think so, especially in port towns where fresh fish was abundant or near monasteries with their own fish farms. Others argue that these vendors likely popped up more frequently on the specific religious fasting days when the demand for fish skyrocketed and they could charge a premium. The reality probably varied from place to place. If you lived in a coastal city, fresh fish was common. But if you were inland, your fresh fish might be something heavily smoked, salted, or dried to the point of being jerky. The quality and availability were entirely dependent on geography. Let's go back to our vendor. Her hands move in a blur, a dance of slicing, dipping, and frying. This isn't just a job. It's a craft honed by necessity and repetition. She likely learned it from her mother, who learned it from hers. It's a trade passed down through generations, a vital part of the city's food web. The people lining up aren't just customers. They're her neighbors, fellow craftspeople, and laborers. There's a sense of community around this little cart, a shared experience built around a simple, hot meal. This wasn't a sterile, transactional exchange like we might experience today. It was personal, direct, and deeply woven into the fabric of daily life. And the taste, it was probably intense. The oil was likely used over and over again, accumulating flavors from countless batches of fish, garlic, and herbs. It wouldn't have been the light, clean taste we expect from modern fried fish. It would have been robust, funky, and unapologetically savory. The bread wrapper wasn't just for holding. It was part of the meal, soaking up the excess grease and becoming a delicious, calorie-dense bonus. In a world where every calorie counted, nothing was wasted. This was survival food, but that doesn't mean it wasn't enjoyed. For someone who had been working since sunrise, that hot, crispy, oily piece of fish would have been a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. So, the next time you enjoy some fish and chips, take a moment to think about its long and humble history. It's a direct descendant of these smoky, bustling, medieval street stalls. It's a tradition born from religious rules, economic necessity, and the timeless human craving for something hot, fast, and delicious. From a rickety cart by a river to a global comfort food, the journey of fried fish is a story of survival, ingenuity, and the enduring power of a simple, good meal. Despite the hardships, pie culture thrived. There were seasonal pies, festival pies, and even religious pies. During Lent, for example, you'd get fish or cheese pies instead of meat. For the Feast of St. Martin, it was all about goose pie. And during coronations or grand banquets, pies the size of wagon wheels were rolled in as centerpieces. There's a legendary tale of a banquet where guests cut into a giant pie and live birds flew out. Imagine that, a bit of dinner theater to go with your duck liver as you wander through the bustling streets. You reach another corner and find an older woman tending a low stone oven built right into the wall of a crumbling shop. Street cooks were often older women, widows, or lower-class wives trying to supplement their family's income. These women were masters of their craft. They knew exactly how to feed a crowd with incredible flavor, lightning speed, and absolutely no waste. You have to respect the hustle. She sees you watching and offers you a fresh one, on the house. You gratefully accept it. This pie has a wonderfully flaky crust, dusted with something that tastes like a mix of fennel and pepper. The filling is still a bit of a mystery, but it's somehow cleaner, brighter than the last one. You nod in appreciation, your mouth full. She nods back. It's a silent moment of mutual understanding, a connection between two people bound by the simple joy of pastry. As the sun begins to drop and the air cools, you notice something interesting. More pie carts are appearing, not fewer. Evening is when the workers head home. Children are sent out on last-minute errands, and late travelers arrive in the city. The demand for a quick, hot meal spikes. The pie men work the crowd with a practiced efficiency, shouting their slogans, expertly flipping their wares, and slipping fresh batches onto the hot coals. This is prime time, and you, with a full belly and greasy hands, are right in the middle of this ancient rhythm. You walk on, savoring the last bite of the delicious crust before tossing the inedible, tough corner to a passing dog. It sniffs it, gives you a look of pure betrayal, and trots away. Fair enough. I guess not everyone is a fan of huff paste, but you're definitely warming up to this life. Medieval fast food may not have had golden arches, but it had golden crusts, smoky street corners, and a unique kind of charm that only slightly questionable meat can deliver. The sky shifts to a cloudy gray as you move toward the edge of the marketplace. Here, the stalls start to thin out, but the scents grow sharper, more distinct. It's a mix of hot oil, smoke, and brine, and then it hits you all at once. Fried fish. Welcome to Medieval Friday dining, where religious obligation meets culinary improvisation. And in this case, it's a deliciously greasy experience. These sellers provided a hot, savory, and most importantly, permissible meal for the masses. Imagine the scene: long wooden tables laden with sizzling fish, just pulled from vats of bubbling oil. The batter is thick and crispy, sealing in the flaky, tender fish inside. The vendors, their faces flushed from the heat, would call out to passersby, their voices cutting through the market chatter. Hot fish, freshly fried. They'd wrap a piece in a thick leaf or a piece of rough cloth, maybe with a wedge of coarse bread on the side. This wasn't just food. It was a communal experience, a ritual that marked the end of the work week and the observance of faith. You watch as a friar, his brown robes smelling faintly of old books and incense, buys a piece and eats it with surprising gusto. A group of apprentices, finally free from their master's workshop, gather around a stall, laughing and joking as they share a large portion. Even wealthy merchants, on their way home to more elaborate meals, can't resist stopping for a quick, greasy bite. The appeal of hot fried food is truly universal, transcending class and time. You decide to try some for yourself. The vendor, a burly man with a stained apron and a surprisingly gentle smile, plucks a piece from the oil with a long-handled fork. He shakes off the excess grease and hands it to you. The heat warms your hands as you take the first bite. The crunch of the batter gives way to the soft, steamy fish. It's seasoned simply with just salt, but the flavor is immense. It's the taste of the river, the fire, and the collective appetite of a city. This simple act of eating connects you directly to the past. You're not just a spectator anymore. You're a participant in the daily life of this medieval world. You're experiencing the same sights, smells, and tastes that people did centuries ago. This journey through the streets is more than just a history lesson. It's a sensory immersion into a lost way of life, a world that was tough and gritty, but also full of flavor, community, and the simple pleasure of a good hot meal. And as you stand there, enjoying your fried fish, you realize that some things, like the comfort of good food, truly never change. I take a seat on a low wall and watch as more people arrive. There are workers finishing their day, a group of giggling children clutching coins tied in kerchiefs, and even a pair of traveling monks in brown robes, fresh ash still on their foreheads. The woman behind the cart greets each person with a nod, her rhythm unbroken as she flips fish and resets the hot coals. As I nibbled the last corner of my fried bread, I realized this is more than just eating. It's a kind of ritual. The gathering itself is part of it. People line up, they eat quietly or chat in soft voices, and then they move on. No one lingers for too long. It feels like nourishment with a dash of faith. Eat, be grateful, and then get back to life. Of course, there's also the unspoken rule of fast food speed. This vendor has it down to a science. A few seconds in the hot oil, a couple of flicks of salt, and a practiced, efficient handoff. There are no delays, no personal questions. You're in and out like a sinner in a confessional. At my elbow, a wiry old man starts muttering something about last week's carp. He claims it gave him dreams about talking birds. I try my best not to make eye contact, It's a strange fringe fact, but some ancient cultures believed certain fish had spiritual properties or, depending on your source, even hallucinogenic ones. Stories tell of saints eating blessed fish that sang scripture or turned into relics. I'm not entirely sure what kind of fish I just ate, but I'm really hoping for nothing stronger than a good nap. Behind me, the bells ring for evening prayer. The vendor starts packing up the last few. Fillets are wrapped and handed off, and the big pan is pulled from the fire. She sprinkles the coals with water, creating a sudden puff of steam that smells like burnt garlic and fish scales. I sigh, my stomach full again, feeling warmed by the simplicity of it all. Maybe it wasn't the cleanest, safest, or even the most appetizing experience by modern standards, but there's something deeply comforting in the rhythm of it. The fried food, the hot coals, and the quiet press of strangers, all sharing something that feels both sacred and greasy. I can imagine another life where I might have stood here every Friday, coin in hand, hoping to get the very crispiest piece. I stand up and wipe my greasy fingers on my cloak, because again, no napkins and stretch. The market is closing, but the streets are still humming with life. And just as one smell fades, a new one drifts through the air. Something rich, spicy, and unmistakably stewed. I decide to follow it because in the medieval fast food game, there's always another bite waiting just around the corner. The scent of savory broth grows stronger as I move farther into the winding heart of the city, where old buildings lean over the street like friends sharing secrets. It's dusk now, and the air has cooled, but not enough to chase away that smell of simmering soup. It floats like a warm cloud between the timber-framed houses. I follow my nose, stepping carefully around a loose cobblestone and nearly tripping over a stray dog that seems to not even notice I exist. And then I see it. It's a heavy iron pot, nearly the size of a washtub, perched over glowing embers in the center of another makeshift food stall. This is the source. The pot is bubbling away, sending plumes of fragrant steam into the evening air. A stout man with a huge ladle is stirring the contents, a mix of dark broth, chunks of meat, and root vegetables. People are already gathered around, holding out wooden bowls. It smells like a hearty, slow-cooked stew, the kind that warms you from the inside out. Imagine walking down a bustling, muddy street in the Middle Ages. The air is thick with the smells of wood smoke, livestock, and unwashed humanity. But cutting through it all is a scent that pulls you in. Garlic leaks, and something deeper, richer. Bones, maybe. You follow your nose and find its source, a massive cauldron bubbling over an open fire. A vendor stands beside it, stirring the thick concoction with a wooden paddle so large it looks like it belongs in a boat. Steam rises in fragrant clouds. A line has already formed, mostly laborers with soot-stained faces and tired eyes, and a skinny boy with his hands shoved deep into his pockets for warmth. No one's talking. They're all just staring into the pot, mesmerized, as if watching a magic spell being brewed. This, right here, was the medieval equivalent of fast food. It was called pottage, and it was the backbone of daily life for the common person. It was cheap to make, incredibly easy to serve, and endlessly variable. Think of it as a stew made from literally whatever was available. Root vegetables, grains like oats or barley, wild herbs, and if you were lucky, some leftover scraps of meat or gristle. You boil everything together for hours, and I mean hours, until it breaks down into a thick, rib-sticking sludge. It might not win any beauty contests, but it tasted a whole lot better than it looked, and it could fill a hungry belly for just a coin or two. It was the perfect meal for the poor, the traveler, or anyone whose own cooking fire had gone cold for the night. So, you step up to the front of the line, your stomach rumbling. You hand over your coin, and the vendor wordlessly dunks a heavy ladle into the pot. The thick liquid clings to it like gravy as he pulls it out. Then it plops into a rough-hewn wooden bowl. He tears off a small wedge of dense, dark bread, the kind, flecked with barley, or maybe just a bit of dirt, and drops it right in. He hands it to you without a word, and you nod your thanks before stepping aside. You find a spot on a low stone wall, cradling the warm bowl like it's a precious treasure. The steam wafts up, and it smells surprisingly good. You used a piece of bread as your spoon, scooping up a hearty bite. The taste is immediate. Sharp onion, a hint of pepper, and an earthy sweetness from parsnips. You chew slowly, savoring the warmth that spreads through you. And then, at the bottom of the bowl, you find a small, chewy bit of gristle. A lucky find. In a world where protein was a luxury, any form of it was a bonus. What's fascinating is that soup was a great equalizer in the Middle Ages. Of course, the lords and ladies in their castles had their own fancy versions. Theirs would be loaded with expensive meats, seasoned with exotic spices like saffron and ginger, and served in gilded bowls. But the fundamental idea was exactly the same. Boil what you have until it's no longer a collection of separate ingredients, but one single, comforting meal. For the nobility, it was a delicacy. For the common folk, it was survival. But a simple pottage, when made by a skilled hand with the right combination of herbs and slow cooking, could be genuinely delicious. In many towns, these giant communal pots were a permanent fixture in the marketplace. They were kept bubbling all day, and sometimes even through the night, fed by a constant supply of wood, scraps, and kitchen refuse from the surrounding homes. The vendor would simply add more water and more ingredients as the level dropped, meaning the stew was constantly evolving. The batch you ate at noon might taste slightly different from the one served at dusk. This leads to a rather quirky and slightly unsettling concept, the perpetual stew. Some historical sources talk about pots of stew that were never fully emptied. They just kept adding to them, day after day, week after week. Why waste time and soap cleaning a pot that never stops cooking? That was the logic. Anyway, can you imagine? There are tales, probably exaggerated, of stews that were kept going for decades, with generations of ingredients and people passing through. It sounds a little romantic, doesn't it? A forever soup. It also sounds, let's be honest, wildly unhygienic by today's standards. But in an era before refrigeration, continuous, intense heat was your best friend. It was the safest thing. You had to kill off the bad stuff. As you finish your pottage, you look around at the other customers. You notice almost no one has a spoon, unless they brought their own. Most people are doing exactly what you did, using the bread to scoop it up. Others just lift the bowl to their lips and sip it directly. You see one old man slurping loudly, smacking his lips with a look of pure bliss, as if he were dining at a royal feast. This wasn't about table manners. It was about getting warm, getting fed, and getting back to work before the next church bell rang, signaling the end of your break. It's a simple, powerful image of daily life, a reminder that for most of human history, food wasn't about elaborate presentation or complex flavors. It was about community, resourcefulness, and the profound comfort of a hot meal on a cold day. That humble bowl of medieval pottage represents a direct connection to the daily struggles and simple joys of our ancestors. Behind the stall, another pot waits, mysteriously covered by a cloth. The smell coming from this one is even richer, more complex. Is this a special batch reserved for wealthier patrons? Or maybe it's just a thicker, heartier version, saved for later in the day. I see a young girl, curious and bold, sneak a peek inside while the vendor is distracted. She gets a gentle swat for her troubles, a soft rebuke. But honestly, you can't blame her. The promise of meat, even just the scent of it, is a powerful motivator in a world where it's a luxury. Not all pottage was created equal. You see, the variety was astonishing. Some recipes were built on a base of beans or lentils, while others used beer for a malty depth to make it even more substantial. Cooks would add grains like spelt or rye. On feast days, the pottage might be a celebration in a bowl, generously laced with chopped bacon or diced chicken. But on the many fasting days dictated by the church, it would be a simpler affair of fish or just plain vegetables. And ultimately, the quality of your meal always came down to who made it and what ingredients they could get their hands on. A truly talented soup vendor could build a loyal following, a dedicated customer base. They didn't have fancy branding or eye-catching signs. Their reputation was built purely on taste. In the 1300s, word of mouth was your Michelin star. A good bowl of pottage would have people talking, sending their friends and neighbors to your stall. This was the original 5-star review, passed from one hungry person to another. There's an ongoing debate among scholars about the legal status of these street food vendors. Were they officially licensed, paying a fee to the city for the right to sell? Or were they just tolerated, a part of the informal economy that filled a crucial need? The answer likely varies from place to place. Some cities had incredibly strict food regulations, with inspectors checking for quality and freshness. In other places, the authorities might have turned a blind eye, as long as the food didn't cause any immediate, dramatic problems, like customers dropping dead on the spot. The church also played a role in feeding the populace. Some monasteries and parishes ran charity kitchens, ladling out free pottage to the poor and destitute. This was a vital lifeline for many, but these services weren't always consistent or available everywhere. For most ordinary people, the most reliable hot meal came not from charity, but from commerce, from a stranger with a big bubbling pot and an instinct for creating delicious, satisfying flavor. I finished my bowl, scraping the last traces from the edges with my piece of bread, just like everyone else around me. It's certainly not gourmet cuisine by modern standards, but it's deeply satisfying. This is comfort food in its most essential, honest form. As I hand the empty bowl back to the vendor, I notice something truly lovely. There's a quiet, shared sense of gratitude among the people eating here. No one is pushing or shouting. There are just warm faces, empty bowls, and that small, profound moment of relief that comes when the gnawing ache of hunger has been replaced by something solid and warm in your belly. The vendor gives me a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement, before turning his attention to the next customer, already ladling another serving of soup. The fire crackles. The pot continues to bubble, a steady, rhythmic heart of this small community. In this corner of the world, life feels like it's held together by the simple, powerful combination of broth and bread. I stand up and move on, wiping my hands on my tunic, as is the custom. The air is getting cooler now as evening settles in. Lanterns are beginning to flicker to life in the upper windows of the surrounding buildings, casting a soft, warm glow. But the city doesn't sleep, not yet. The day's work may be done for some, but the city's nightlife is just beginning. Somewhere out there, someone is pouring ale. Someone is slicing onions for a late-night snack. Someone else is stoking coals for a fire. Because where there are people, there is always hunger and thirst, and there is always someone clever enough to meet that need with a bowl and a ladle, or a mug and a tap. My footsteps lead me back towards the edges of the market square. This time, I'm not following a scent, but a sound. It's a familiar symphony of city nightlife, the steady, cheerful clink of mugs, the deep rumble of shared laughter, and the low hum of a song being sung slightly off-key by a group of people who have clearly had a good time. I round a corner and there they are, a line of ale stalls, haphazardly assembled, each one lit by a single sputtering torch that dances and flickers in the evening wind. Welcome to the medieval equivalent of happy hour, or perhaps a liquid lunch that is stretched long into the night. These stalls aren't elaborate setups. Most are little more than simple wooden counters balanced on sawhorse legs. They're shaded by old canvas sheets, stained and worn, that flap and snap in the breeze. Behind the counters, barrels of ale are clustered together. Some are already tapped with wooden spouts, ready to serve, while others are being rolled into place or lifted with grunts of effort. The people running these stalls are often women, with strong, wide arms and aprons that seem to carry more history than hygiene. Their hands move with a practiced speed and efficiency that's mesmerizing to watch. A coin is slapped down on the wooden counter. A clay or wooden mug is swiftly filled with frothy, amber liquid, and the next customer is already stepping forward before the last one has even taken their first sip. This is a high-volume, fast-paced business. There's no time for small talk, just a quick, efficient exchange that quenches a powerful thirst.